Those who followed my channel a while should know that shamans are still very much an integral part in Korea when it comes to paranormal or spiritual matters, as evidenced by numerous channels run by shamans here on YouTube alone. It's not that the majority believe in shamanism or seek their advice in modern Korea, but shamanism does form some of the basis of Korean culture and spiritual worldview. By the way, I already discussed various aspects of Korean shamans and shamanisms in my previous episodes. If you missed them, I'll link the playlist in the description and at the corner of the screen. As we saw in one such previous episode, episode 123 to be exact, shamans' day-to-day business is usually that of a fortune teller, which usually wraps up with passing on the insight from their shamanic gods, or probably write a suitable talisman if the situation calls for it. But when a situation demands something beyond a simple consultation, shamans would provide a ritual called 굿, the crème de la crème of shaman's art. In most people's mind, a 굿 calls for the image of a colorful costume, loud and rhythmic music, dance and chant to oblivion, and sometimes spectacles like shaman walking on blades. But as you can see from today's stories, shamanic rituals can come in various forms depending on the task and can be often simpler and more somber. Whatever the shape and form, shamans are not all-powerful exorcist or witch figure who can conjure or expel spirits at their will. As the servant to their shamanic gods and medium, their task is to lure, coax, persuade, and negotiate with the spiritual forces, whether it's praying to God or gods for a help or a good fortune, or lending their body to a spirit as its mouthpiece, or directly communicating with the spirits. Their job is that of a mediator, and every step of a shamanic ritual is geared to that function. So, here are 4 allegedly true stories from Korea about 굿, the shamanic rituals. From the very first ritual to become a shaman, to finding missing people, to contacting the spirit of the dead. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host, Anthony. I was born and grew up in a small countryside village. My tiny primary school had only 2 teachers for the entire 6 years, so you get the picture. Back when I was 8, that's decades ago already, one of my mates had a shaman grandma who was well established as a local shaman. My mate lived just with her grandma and mom. Her mom was rumored to be a single mom, and my mate indeed didn't know who her dad was. Let's call her Jinhee for the sake of the story. We were all young, and there was just a few kids in the whole village anyway, so we really didn't care any of that and got along well with Jinhee. One day, Jinhee announced her grandma was to throw a big shamanic ritual soon, and bought tons of food and prepared quite a few spectacles for that. We were all excited. In the small village where nothing happened, the festive food and sweets were only reserved for big holiday seasons. Such a ritual would be an occasion to get to taste some meat, fill our mouths with a big colorful candy. Jinhee became the star among us. We all butted up to her to ensure that we were to be granted with some more extra festive food. Brown noses, weren't we all? The day of the big ritual came. We didn't fully understand then, but the ritual that day was to make Jinhee's mom a shaman. A ritual of ordaining, shall I say? A ritual for a newbie shaman to prove herself worthy of the task and officially accept the shamanic god in her. It was the decision of Jinhee's shaman grandma, apparently. Carrying on the family business should be a way of making living as a single mom with no asset worthy to mention of. It had been known Chinny's mom indeed inherited a bit of a spiritual talent herself anyway. So much so, when Chinny's grandma, the real shaman, was unavailable, people sometimes seeked Chinny's mom's opinion too. But it had been also known Chinny's mom didn't really want to be a shaman all this time. For a time she even turned to Christianity to resist it. Anyway, back to the ritual. It carried on a long time with the dances and chants. One of the most important steps of such a ritual is to see if the wannabe shaman could find the hidden shamanic ritual tool, such as a ritual bell, fan, or flags. Passing the test would prove the wannabe was indeed chosen by the shamanic god. And Chinny's mom seemed struggling to find her tool. Day was turning to evening, and we were all getting anxious. The colorful candies were melting down under the summer's humid heat, and the boiled meat would go off soon. But the ritual was dragging on. It wasn't just us kids either. Other village adults who came to see the ritual also started whispering among themselves, "Well, the daughter doesn't seem to be as powerful as her mom, does she?" But then, sudden and fierce jingle of the bell silenced the crowd. It came from behind us, followed by a scratchy, deep male voice roaring, "You fool! Are you happy now to see the little girl holding the bell?" It was a really thundering and scary voice that some of the kids even got soft knees. When we looked back, there was Chinhy, holding a shamanic bell and with a fierce expression we had never seen from her. Chinny's mom dropped on the ground with a teary scream. It all revealed only later, but the reason Chinny's mom finally agreed to become a shaman was, yes, partially to make a living, but more importantly, to save her daughter from the shaman's fate. Apparently, Chinhy inherited even stronger spiritual talent than her mom, and the family's shamanic god was eyeing on Chinhy as his next mouthpiece. But all the effort was in vain. In the end, it was Chinhy that was chosen by the god. It left us all shocked, no less than Chinhy's shaman grandma herself. Not sure if that was the cause, but she passed away later in the same year. Chinhy and her mom moved away before he entered middle school. Her mom explained away it was for a better education for Chinhy, but we all saw and knew how Chinhy sometimes wandered around the village, bent like her late grandma, and shouting scary predictions to random villagers like, "Myung's dad's passing away soon," or "Your crop will go to shit this year," and such, in that same scratchy, scary voice. Of course, it triggered all sorts of rumors among the villagers that Chinny was taken by an evil god, probably because her mother refused the shamanic fate. That was why Chinny only predicted misfortunes. Or that Chinny's father was a powerful shaman himself, and Chinny inherited from the father's side. I guess Chinny's mom decided that they could not live with all the talks behind their back in that little village anymore. Now we all became grown-ups, and most left the hometown, including myself. But when we reunite on rare occasions, we still sometimes talk about Chinhy. Clearly the shock we felt to see her jingling the bell that summer evening has left us an unforgettable mark in our collective memory. I can't verify if it's true, but I hear Chinhy finished her university education and now became a successful shaman. Whatever the fate, Chinhy was pretty and smartest among us, and I hope the news is true. My grandmother believed in superstitions. According to what I gather from what my aunts and family members talked among themselves, Granny did have certain spiritual sensitivity herself. She would occasionally see spirits or forewarned people around her about things to come, which invariably turned out as she predicted. At the end of her life, she was in coma and on life support. Basically, she didn't have a chance to live her last words to her family and friends. After the funeral, citing Granny's leaning to shamanism, aunts decided to call in a shaman to perform a ritual wishing Granny's peaceful passing to the netherworld. In the morning of the ritual, I went out for a walk by myself. I sat on a bench with my mind busy with various thoughts, when a rather big black butterfly flew over and around me. I don't know if I'm correct, but from my experience, it isn't very common to run across a black butterfly. It kept circling over me good 10 times or so. I usually don't like insects, but the butterfly made me feel a bit weird, and I let it be till it flew away again. And then I came back to Grandpa's for the time of ritual. It was the first time for me to get to see a shamanic ritual, so it was all very new and curious for me. The male shaman led it, while a female drummer accompanied his chant, starting with a calling for the Jade King and various gods. And then the shaman suddenly fell. His assistant announced that he was about to contact with the spirit of my granny. Shaman eventually sat up and started lamenting loudly.
I had so much that I wanted to say before I go. How sad I couldn't utter a word before I died.
And then he pointed his belly, saying how painful it was there. Granny died of issue with her stomach indeed. And then he came up to spectators there and talked to them one by one, from grandpa, aunts, cousins, and even neighbors. At first, I didn't believe it at all. I wouldn't call myself a skeptic, but it was hard to take in what was happening in front of my very eyes. But soon the shaman proved himself to know all the details about each individual he talked to. Family matters could he have been informed by somebody, but about Granny's neighbors and friends too? He really intimately talked with each of them as Granny would have herself when she was alive. Then he turned to Grandpa and demanded money for the journey to the underworld. Grandpa handed over some. Then Shaman turned to Granny's grandchildren, including me, and gave the money out, calling each of them as my puppy or my baby. Shaman then claimed to be starving and asked for kimchi and raw meat. He chewed kimchi and raw meat and spat them out and said that he was full now. As you can imagine, I was intrigued, but still couldn't fully believe what Shaman should say and behave were genuine. But what he did next changed my mind. After crying and laughing a while, Shaman claimed that Granny now left. He then burnt a piece of white paper, and it burnt in the shape of a butterfly. He said Granny was reincarnated into a black butterfly. And apparently, I wasn't the only one who got shocked by that statement. My older sister too saw a black butterfly flying into the funeral home and hovering about a long while on the first day of Granny's funeral. Also, my younger brother and other young cousins went out to play in the stream on the day of shamanic ritual, and they too saw a black butterfly hovering over each one of them before it flew away again. In the later days, on our way down after visiting Granny's tomb, again a black butterfly flew around us all the way down to the foot of the mountain, as if to see us off. Is Granny really reincarnated as the black butterfly, as the shaman claimed? My grandma, Mom's mother, was a shaman. I grew up under her care till I became adult. From my earliest memory, I went wherever Granny went, to shrines, village totems, and temples. She would often go to the nearby mountain to pray late at night, and I would accompany her there either hand in hand or on her back, and play or doze away around her. This story is about the first major job she got as a newbie shaman. She was already a married woman with 4 children then. She could barely afford to set up her little shaman's establishment with the help from her godmother. It's a shaman's term to call their mentors. Fortunately, it was believed that a newbie shaman was at the peak of her shamanic intuition, and soon people flocked at her place, mostly to have their fortune told and seek an advice, about their children who left home for study and work, and husband's new business, and so on. But then one day, a group of women, young and old, came to Grandma. They were all in a state already, in tears and bewailing, some even passing out with intense emotion. Apparently, they were the wives and mothers of the fishermen, about 10 of them. They recently went out together on a boat, which went missing without a trace. The boat was owned by another man, and before the sale, the captain went to negotiate about the date and details with the boat owner. It was the maiden voyage for the boat, and the captain wanted to consult a shaman to perform a blessing ritual and appoint the date of sail. But the owner rejected, that he didn't care about such superstitions. What he cared for was the business, and insisted that the captain sail off as soon as possible. The captain could not argue with the owner, but seeked the old shaman, the godmother of my grandma, to ask her opinion.
The set departure date is most unlucky, and the journey would be doomed. What is a bigger catch comparing to your lives?
Said the old shaman, and advised the captain to renegotiate the plan. It scared the captain enough to perform a makeshift ritual for the safe return himself, with some drinks and food in front of the boat, but not enough to argue with the boat owner. So the boat departed on the scheduled date, but soon met with rough weather and lost contact in a rainstorm. It failed to return to the port on the scheduled day, but now desperate family of the missing fisherman came to see my grandma. Seeing the room full of women and old ladies crying and begging, Grandma sought what she could do to help. Weather was still rough, but she took some gong, candles, and incense and went up to the breakwater. Quoting her own word, she prayed to the sea god's palace there. Weather got rougher, and high waves slapped at the breakwater as if to push Grandma's plea away. She sensed it was all too late, but there wasn't much more she could do. Meanwhile, the boat owner and the community members were organizing the search for the missing boat and man, but was put on a hold due to the raging high wind and sea.
No need of all that. They are coming back tomorrow,
Grandma said to them. And indeed, just as she said, they came back as the following day broke, as washed-up bodies at the coast. The wreck of the boat was also discovered not far from the coast. There was no survivor. I don't know if the disaster was really because the new boat sailed off with no ritual and on an unlucky date. Grandma just explained such a ritual is to seek an approval from the sea god.
Wouldn't you get upset if some stranger barged into your place without a permission? She said.
The owner of the boat bought a new boat, but no fisherman would want to work for him, and in the end, he had to leave the area altogether. The year was 1987. Summer that year was particularly hot. I call myself of those years a dog. I was barely 20 then and was experiencing a late teenage angst. No amount of excess alcohol, delinquency, physical and verbal violence, and promiscuous sex could calm down my thirst and rebel without cause. That summer too I felt suffocated, that if I stayed home I would literally die. So I headed down south with just a backpack on my back, with no plan or destination. After a couple of weeks wandering down to Busan, I heard some of my mates got a summer job in Jeju Island and decided to join them. The first impression of the island was grey after the early evening shower, but I felt there I could finally breathe again. Jeju Island at the time was still raw and beautiful without the swarms of tourists. I think I spent my first week there drinking day and night. A young man from Seoul seemed to be enough to trigger interest from the local ladies, and I was entertained enough just with some bottles and girls. But soon all the money in the pocket ran out, and I joined the other mates' work. It was basically a manual labor, installing various structures or art installations. Work was hard, but I had nothing to complain other than I had to wake up early. The hours weren't too long, pay was decent for a young man with no experience, and because it was an outdoor work, we often got on unexpected breaks and day offs when it got rainy or stormy, which there were many on the southern island. Then came July. We were once again idling for 3 days because of typhoon. A piece of news was going around the village that the son of the village leader went missing. His motorbike was found on the bank of the local reservoir, and people feared if he was drowned there. When the initial search didn't yield anything, they decided to drain the reservoir. The search resumed when the water level went down to knee-deep, but there still wasn't any sign. People sighed of relief. The missing young man was known for his rather erratic behavior, and it was assumed maybe he went off to the mainland on a whim. 4 or 5 days passed without an update. We got another unexpected day off because of rain, and one mate called us out that they were doing a shamanic ritual by the reservoir, that we might be able to get some free food and drinks there. We were all bored and agreed to catch the spectacle. Village people are kind. Well, I write kind and read nosy. They explain the situation down to details to us strange bystanders too. The village leader could not shake off the feeling that his son was still in the reservoir and seeked and brought in a shaman all the way from Gwangju. She was apparently known for her ability to console the drowned souls. When she arrived, she took a one look at the missing young man's motorbike and declared he was in the water. The shaman looked very old, about 80 years. She didn't do anything showy that I was expecting, no walking on blades or letting blood out of a pig. The old shaman in white stood calmly at the edge of the water and chanted something quietly, jingling her ritual bells. The weather turned suddenly, The rain ceased and the gusts stopped. Maybe it was just the temperamental island weather, but... The shaman floated away a ball tied to a white string over the water. She further chanted for a good 5 minutes and told her assistant to fish it out again. Shaman took one look inside the ball and he handed it over to the village leader. His face turned white and dropped on the spot. Other spectators who took a glance also let out a low scream and moved away from the ball. We got curious and moved in closer, but could not see what there was. All the while, the shaman asked the assistant to bring out a box. Inside was a rather large meju. It's a brick of cooked soybeans. You hang it out dry and ferment like a block of cheese or ham, and it's the base ingredient of many fermented condiments like soy sauce, Korean bean paste, and gochujang. The shaman tied it to a white string and told the assistant to throw it into the reservoir. We were amused. A meju would just melt and break away in the water. Not knowing anything better, we joked among ourselves. Is she turning the whole reservoir into a doenjang soup or what? The shaman once again chanted some sort of spell with the jingles of her bell. But it was more intense than before, even shaking her body a little bit. While people's attention moved to her, I could finally take a glimpse of the ball from earlier. Inside were hairs, clearly that of a human, quite a lot of them too. My logic was trying to come up with how they could appear in the ball. "Pull it out!" Shaman shouted with such a force that I didn't expect from a little old woman. "You boys too! Pull it out!" She told us, and as if under a spell, we all joined to pull out the white string that was tied to the block of meju in the water. There were about 10 of us, me, my mates, and some village guys, but we could not pull it out. The string got tight with resistance, and it felt we were fighting against a big powerful fish or something. Not sure of what was going on, I gave a quick glance to the shaman. "Carry on! Don't think or say anything! Just carry on pulling!" With a face devoid of emotions, Shaman said with a low voice. And just like a fish would, the resistance finally let out, and we could pull the rope towards the shore. A short while after, I could make out the outline of meju block floating above the surface. Some screamed, some dropped on the ground, and everybody stepped away from the shore. There it was. The body of village leader's son, all bloated and eyes still opened, pulled out by his hair that were all stuck to the block of meju. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Well, it was yet another episode about shamans. Some of my European friends first reacted with a scoff when I dealt with the subject of shaman and shamanism. I guess the word shaman conjured in their mind something decisively primitive and dark age. But what can I say? It's still there as a part of shining ultra-modern Korea. I don't anyway promote or believe in shamanism as such, but I advocate it to be recognized as the cultural element. I hope various stories I read you about shamans could help you see shamans beyond taboo and prejudice. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a like and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. If you're a lover of bizarre and scary, or want to dig deeper into Korean and other Asian culture, my channel is for you. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters get an early access to my new videos. Thank you. It's always a struggle to decide next week's topic. What will it be? Well, come back next Sunday and find out. Until then, stay safe and take care.